Hey, Charlie here from Camp Pivika. Let's keep going with the BFG. We're on Fribscottles and Whiz Poppers. By now, Sophie was beginning to feel not only extremely hungry, but very thirsty as well. She had been at home. She would have finished her breakfast long ago. Are you sure there's nothing else to eat around here except those disgusting smelly snozcumbers? She asked. Not even a fizzwinkle, answered the big friendly giant. In that case, may I please have a little water? She said. Water? Said the BFG, frowning mightily. What is water? We drink it, Sophie said. What do you drink? Frobscottle, announced the BFG. All giants is drinking is Frobscottle. Is it as nasty as your snozcumbers? Sophie asked. Nasty, cried the BFG. Never is it nasty. Frobscottle is sweet and jumbly. He got up from his chair and went to a second huge cupboard. He opened it and took out a glass bottle that must have been 6 feet tall. The liquid inside was pale green, and the bottle was half full. Here is Frobscottle, he cried, holding the bottle up proud and high, as though it contained some rare wine. Delumptious fizzy Frobscottle, he shouted. He gave it a shake, and the green stuff began to fizz like mad. But look, it's fizzing the wrong way, Sophie cried. And indeed it was. The bubbles inside, instead of traveling upwards and bursting on the surface, were shooting downwards and bursting at the bottom. A pale green, frothy frizz was forming at the bottom of the bottle. Here's the picture there. The bubbles are going down. You can see that. What on earth is you meaning the wrong way? Asked the BFG. In our fizzy drinks, Sophie said, the bubbles always go up and burst at the top. Upwards is the wrong way, cried the BFG. You mustn't ever be having bubbles going upwards. That was the most flush-buckling rubbish I've ever been hearing. Why do you say that? Sophie asked. You was asking me why? Cried the BFG, waving the enormous bottle around as though he were conducting an orchestra. You was actually meaning to tell me you cannot see the scrawny mistake in having bubbles flying up instead of down? You said it was flush-buckling. Now you say it's scrawny. Which is it? Sophie asked politely. Both, cried the BFG. It is flush-buckling and scrawny mistake to let the bubbles go upwards. If you can't see why, you must be as quacky as a duckhound. By Ringo, your head must be filled with frogs, quinkers, and buzzwangles. I is fritted to know why you can't think at all. Why shouldn't the bubbles go upward? Sophie asked. I will explain, said the BFG. But tell me first, what name is you calling Frobscottle by? One is Coke, said Sophie, another is Pepsi. There are lots of them. And all the bubbles is going up? They all go up, Sophie said. Catastrophe, said the BFG. Upgoing bubbles is a catastrophe distappery. Will you please tell me why? Sophie asked. You must listen carefully If you listen carefully I will try to explain, said the BFG. But your brain is so full of buckwiffles, I doubt you will ever understand. I'll do my best, said Sophie, patiently. I'm going to grab my glasses here. That'll make this easier. Oh. All right. I'll do my best, Sophie said patiently. Well, very well then. When you was drinking this cokey drink of yours, said the BFG, is it going straight down into your tummy? Is that right, or is it left? It's right, said Sophie. And the bubbles is going into your tummy, right or left? Right again, Sophie said. And the bubbles is fizzing upwards? Of course, Sophie said. Which means, said the BFG, they will come all swish-whiffling up your throat and out your mouth and make a fulsome, belchy burp. That is often true, Sophie said, but what's wrong with a little burp now and again? It's sort of fun. Burping is filsome, the BFG said. Us giants is never doing it. But with your drink, Sophie said, what was it you called it? Frobscottle, said the BFG. With Frobscottle, the bubbles in your tummy will be going downwards, and you will be having a far nastier result. Why nasty? Said the BFG, frowning. Because, Sophie said, blushing a little, they will go down instead of up. They will be coming out somewhere else with an even louder and ruder noise. A whiz popper, cried the BFG, beaming at her. Us giants is making whiz poppers all the time. Whiz popping is a sign of happiness. It is music to our ears. You're surely not telling me that whiz popping is forbidden amongst human beings. It is considered extremely rude, Sophie said. But you was whiz popping, is you not, now and again? Said the BFG. Everyone is whiz popping, if that's what you call it, Sophie said. Kings and queens are whiz popping. Presidents are whiz popping. Glamorous film stars are whiz popping. Little babies are whiz popping. But where I come from, it is not polite to talk about it. Redunculous, said the BFG. If everyone is making whiz poppers, then why not talk about it? We is now having a swiggle of delicious frobscottle, and you will see the happy result. The BFG took his bottle, or shook the bottle vigorously. The pale green stuff fizzed and bubbled. He removed the cork and took a tremendous gurgling swig. It's glummy, he cried. I love it. For a few moments, the big friendly giant stood quite still, and a look of absolute ecstasy began to spread over his long, wrinkly face. Then suddenly the heavens opened, and he let fly with a series of the loudest and rudest noises Sophie had ever heard in her life. They reverberated around the walls of the cave like thunder, and the glass jars on their shelves rattled. But most astonishing of all, the force of the explosions actually lifted the enormous giant clear off his feet like a rocket. Whoopee! He cried, and then came down to earth again. Now that is whiz-popping for you. Sophie burst out laughing. She couldn't help it. Have some yourself, cried the BFG, tipping his neck of the enormous bottle towards her. Don't you have a cup? Sophie said. No cups, only bottle. Sophie opened her mouth, and very gently the BFG tipped the bottle forward and poured some of the fabulous frobscottle down her throat. Oh gosh, how delicious it was. It was sweet and refreshing. It tasted of vanilla and cream, and just the faintest trace of raspberries and an edge of flavor. The bubbles were wonderful. Sophie could actually feel them bouncing and bursting all around her tummy. It was an amazing sensation. It felt as though hundreds of tiny people were dancing a jig inside of her and tickling her with her toes. It was lovely. It's lovely, she cried. Just wait, said the BFG, flapping his ears. Sophie could feel the bubbles traveling lower and lower into her tummy, and then suddenly, inevitably, the explosion came. The trumpet sounded, and she made the walls of the cavern ring and sound of music and thunder. Bravo! Shouted the BFG, waving the bottle. You was very good for a beginner. Now let's have some more. Here's the picture of them going up there. He's floating. It's our next chapter. Journey to Dream Country. After the mad frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on the top of the enormous table. You was feeling better now? Asked the big friendly giant. Much better. Thank you, Sophie said. Whenever I was feeling a bit scrawty, said the BFG, A few gollops of Frobscottle is always making me hopscotchy again. I must say it's quite an experience, Sophie said. It's a Raz-Twizzler, the BFG said. It's voluptuous. She turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net. I is galloping off now, he said, to catch some more wopsy-whiffling dreams for my collection. I is doing this every day without missing. Is you wish to come with me? Not me, thank you very much, Sophie said. Not with those other giants lurking around. I is snuggling you very cozy into the pocket of my waistcoat, the BFG said. No one is seeing you. Before Sophie could protest, he had picked her up off the table and popped her on into his waistcoat pocket. There was plenty of room in there. Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out from? He asked her. There's one in here already, she said. She had found a small hole in the pocket, and when she put one eye close to it, she could see very well out indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up his suitcase in one hand, and took the pole with the net out on the end in the other hand, and marched towards the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead trees stood, where all the other giants were skulking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of her leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw a group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead. Hold your breaths, the BFG whispered down to her. Cross your fingers. Here we go. We is going right past all these other giants. Is you seeing out that great whopping? Is you seeing that great whopping one? The one nearest to us? I see him, Sophie whispered back, quivering. That is the horriblest of them all, and the biggest of them all. He is called the flesh lump eating giant. I don't want to hear about him, Sophie said. He is 54 feet high, the BFG said, softly as he jogged along. And he is swallowing human beings like they sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time. You are making me nervous, Sophie said. I is nervous myself, the BFG whispered. I always gets as jumpsy as a jog hopper whenever the flesh lump eating giant is around. Keep away from him, Sophie pleaded. Not possible, the BFG answered. He is galloping easily 2 times as quickly as me. Shall we turn back? Sophie said. Turning back is worse, the BFG said. If they see me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks. They would never eat you, though, would they? Sophie asked. Giants is never just guzzling other giants, the BFG said. They is fighting and twirling a lot with another, but never guzzling. Human beings are a lot more tasty to them. The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned, watching him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well into the right of the group. Through her little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh lump eating giant moving over to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just lopped over casually to the point to where the BFG would have to pass. The others lopped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them altogether as she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they loped slowly across the plain with long lolloping strides, heading towards the BFG. Here comes the runty one, boomed Flesh Lumper. Ho ho there, runty one. Where's you Splash wiggling away to in such hefty hurry? He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stopped and stood quite still and said, "Be so kind as to letting go of my hair, Flesh Lump Eater." But the Flesh Lump Eater released him and stepped back stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around waiting for all the fun to start. "Now then, you little gobs squiffer," boomed the Flesh Eater. "We all of us wanting to know where you's galloping off every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off into anywhere until it is getting dark. The human beings could be easily spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen, is we not?" "We is not," shouted the other giants. "Go back to your cave, runty one." "I is not galloping to any human being country," the BFG said. "I is going other places." "I is thinking," said the Flesh Lump Eater, "that you was catching human beings and keeping them as pets." "Right you is," cried the Blood Bottler. "Just now I am hearing him chittering to one of them in his cave." "You is welcome to go search my cave from back to front," the BFG answered. "You can go looking into every crook and nanny. There is no human beings or stringy beans or rudder beans or jelly beans or any other beans in there." Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Through the tiny peephole, she watched the giants clustering around the poor BFG. How revolting they were! All of them had piggy eyes and enormous mouths. When the Flesh Lump Eater was speaking, she got a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black, like the slab of a black steak. Every one of them was more than twice as tall as the BFG. Suddenly, the Flesh Lump Eater shot out two enormous hands and grabbed the BFG around the waist. He tossed him high in the air and shouted, "Catch him, man-hugger!" The man-hugger caught him, and the other giants spread out quickly in a large circle, each giant about 20 yards from his neighbor, preparing for the game they were going to play. Now the man-hugger threw the BFG far and high, shouting, "Catch him, Bone Cruncher!" The Bone Cruncher ran forward and caught the tumbling BFG and immediately swung him up again. "Catch him, child chewer!" he shouted, and so on it went. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, vying with each other to see who would throw him the highest. Sophie dug her nails into the side of his pocket, trying to prevent herself from tumbling out when she was upside down. She felt as though she were in a barrel going over Niagara Falls, and all the time there was the fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch the BFG, and he would go crashing to the ground. "Catch him, Meat Dripper! Catch him, Gizzard Glumpler! Catch him, Maid Masher! Catch him, Blood Bottler! Catch him! Catch him! Catch him!" In the end, when they got bored with this game, they dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few kicks and shouted, "Run, you little runt! Let us be seeing how fast you is galloping." The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. He managed to dodge them. "Ruddy little runt," they shouted. "Troggy little twit! Shrivelly little shrimp, muggy little midget." And there they are, throwing him into the air. Poor BFG. "Squaggy little squid, grumbly little grub." At last the BFG got clear of them, and in another couple minutes, the pack of the giants was out of sight over the horizon. Sophie popped her head up from the pocket. "I didn't like that," she said. "Phew," said the BFG. "Few and far between. There was a nasty crushing mood today, was they not? I is sorry you having such a whirligig time." "No worse than you," said Sophie. "Would they ever really hurt you?" "I is never trusting them," the BFG said. How do they actually catch the humans they eat? Sophie asked. They is usually just sticking an arm in through the bedroom window and snitching them from their beds, the BFG said. Like you did to me. Ah, but I isn't eating you, the BFG said. How else do they catch them? Sophie asked. Sometimes, the BFG said, they is swimming in the sea like fishies, and only their heads showing above the water. And then one comes out, a big hairy hand, and grabs someone off the beach. Children as well? Often chitters. Little chitters who is building sand castles on the beach. That is who the swimming ones are. Little chitters is not so tough to eat as an old grandmama. So says the chili chewing giant. As they talked, the BFG was galloping fast over the land. Sophie was standing right up in his waistcoat pocket, now holding onto the edge with both hands. Her head and shoulders were in the open and the wind was blowing in her hair. How else do they catch people? She asked. All of them is having their own special ways of catching the human being, the BFG said. The mid-tripping giant is preferring to pretend he is a big tree growing in the park. He is standing in the park in the dusky evening, and he is holding great big branches over his head. And there he is waiting for some happy families and coming to have a picnic under the spreading tree. The meat-dripping giant is watching them as they lay out as they have their little picnic. But in the end, it is Meat Dripper who is having the picnic. It's too awful, Sophie cried. The gizzard-gippering giant is a city lover, the BFG went on. The gizzard gulper is lying high up between the roofs of the houses in the big cities. He is lying there as snugly as a sniggler, watching all the human beings walking on the street below. And when he sees one that looks like it has a whopsy good flavor, he grabs it. He is simply reaching down and snitching it off the street like a monkey taking a nut. He says it is nice to be able to pick and choose what you are having for supper. He says it is like choosing from a menu. Don't people see him do it? Sophie asked. Never is they seeing him. Do not forget it is dusky dark at this time. Also, the gizzard gulper has a mighty fast arm. His arm is going up and down quicker than Squinkers. But if all these people are disappearing every night, surely there is some sort of outcry, Sophie said. The world is a whopping big place, the BFG said. It is 100 different countries, and giants is clever. They is careful not to be skittering off to the same country too often. They always be skitter-fiddling around. Even so, Sophie said. Do not forget, the BFG said, that human beings is disappearing everywhere all the time without the giants is guzzling them up. Human beings is killing each other much quicker than giants be doing it. But we don't eat each other, Sophie said. Giants isn't eating each other, the BFG said, nor is giants killing each other. Giants is not very lovely, but is not killing each other. Nor is crocodile dillies killing other crocodile dillies, or is pussycats killing pussycats. They kill mice, said Sophie. Oh, but they is not killing their own kind, the BFG said. Human beings are the only animals that killing their own kind. Don't poisonous snakes kill each other? Sophie asked. She was searching desperately for another creature that behaved as badly as the human. Even poisonous snakes is never killing each other, the BFG said. Nor is the most fearsome creatures like tigers and rhinoceroses. None of them is ever killing their own kind. Have you ever thought about that? Sophie went silent. I is not understanding human beings at all, the BFG said. You is a human being, and you is saying it is grizzling and horrigus for giants to be eating human beings? Right or left? Right, Sophie said. But human beings is squishing each other all the time, the BFG said. They is shooting guns and going up aeroplanes to drop bombs on each other's heads every week. The human beings is always killing each other human beings. He was right. Of course he was right, and Sophie knew it. She was beginning to wonder whether human beings were any better than the giants. Even so, she said, defending her own race, I think it's rotten those foul giants would go off every night to eat humans. Humans have never done them any harm. That is what the little piggy wig is saying every day, the BFG said. He's saying, I has never done any harm to the human being, so why is he be eating me? Oh dear, Sophie said. The human beings is making rules to suit themselves, the BFG went on. But the rules they is making do not suit the little piggy wiglies. Am I right or left? Right, Sophie said. Giants is also making rules. Their rules is not suiting the human beings. Everybody's making his own rules to suit himself. But you don't like it that those beastly giants are eating humans every night, do you? Sophie asked. I do not, the BFG answered firmly. One right is not making two lefts. Is you quite cozy down there in my pocket? I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into that magical top gear of his. He began hurtling forward with phenomenal leaps. His speed was unbelievable. The landscape became blurred, and again Sophie had to duck down out of the whistling gale to save her head from being blown off her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened to the wind screaming past. It came knifing through the tiny peephole in the pocket, and whooshed around like a hurricane. But this time the BFG didn't stay in top gear long. It seemed as though he had some barrier to cross. A vast mountain, perhaps, or an ocean or a great desert. But having crossed it, he once again slowed down to his normal gallop, and Sophie was able to pop her head up and look out once more at the view. She noticed immediately that it was now another paler country. The sun had disappeared above a film of vapor. The air was becoming cooler every minute. The land was flat and treeless, and there seemed to be no color in it at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, and the air became colder still, and everything became paler until soon there was nothing but gray and white all around them. They were in a country of swirling mists and ghostly vapors. There was some sort of grass underfoot, but it was not green. It was ashy gray. There was no sign of a living creature and no sound at all except for the soft thud of the BFG's footsteps as he hurtled through the fog. Suddenly he stopped. We is here as last, he announced. He bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. She was still in her nightie and her feet were bare. She shivered and stared around her and the swirling mists and ghostly vapors. Where are we? She asked. We is in dream country, the BFG said. This is where all dreams is beginning. Dream catching. The big friendly giant put the suitcase on the ground. He bent down low so that his enormous face was close to Sophie's. From now on, we is keeping still as a winky little mices, he whispered. Sophie nodded. The misty vapors swirled around her and made her cheeks damp and left dewdrops in her hair. The BFG opened the suitcase and took out several empty glass jars. He set them ready on the ground, and with their screw tops removed, he then stood up very straight. His head was now high up in the swirling mist, and it kept disappearing, and then reappearing again. He was holding up the long net in his right hand. Sophie, staring upwards, saw through the mist that his colossal ears were beginning to swivel from his head. They began waving gently to and fro. Suddenly, the BFG pounced. He leaped high into the air and swung the net through the mist with a great swishing sweep of his arm. "Got him!" he cried. A jar! Quick! Quick, quick, quick!" Sophie picked up a jar and held it up to him. He grabbed hold of it and lowered the net. Very carefully, he tipped something absolutely invisible from the net into the jar. He dropped the net and swiftly clapped over one hand over the jar. "The top," he whispered. "The top jar. Quick!" Or the jar top. "The jar top, quick!" Sophie picked up the screw top and handed it to him. He screwed it on tight, and the jar was closed. The BFG was very excited. He held the jar close to one ear and listened intently. "It's a wink squiffler," he whispered with a thrill in his voice. It's even better. It's a fizz wizard. It's a golden fizz wizard." Sophie stared at him. Oh my," he said, holding the jar in front of him. "This will be giving some little toddler a very happy night when I is blowing it in." "Is it really a good one?" Sophie asked. "A good one? It's a golden fizz wizard," he said. "It is not often I is getting one of these." He handed the jar to Sophie and said, "Please be still as a starfish now. I is thinking that there may be a whole swarm of fizz wizards up here today. And kindly do stop breathing. You was terribly noisy down there." "I haven't moved a muscle," Sophie said. "Then don't," the BFG answered sharply. Once again, he stood up tall in the mist, holding his net at the ready. Then came the long silence, the waiting, the listening, and at last, with surprising suddenness, came the leap and a swish of the net. "Another jar!" he cried. "Quick, quick, quick, quick!" When the second dream was safely in the jar, the top was screwed down. The BFG held it to his ear. "Oh no," he cried. "Oh mince, my maggots! Oh swipe my swoggles!" "What's the matter?" Sophie asked. "It's a troggle humper," he shouted. His voice was filled with fury and anguish. "Oh, save our solos!" he cried. "Deliver us from weasels! The devil is dancing on my dibbler!" Here's the BFG and Sophie catching dreams. All right. "What are you talking about?" Sophie said. The BFG was getting more distressed with every moment. "Oh, bash my eye bones!" he cried, waving the jar in the air. "I come all this way to get lovely golden dreams, and what is I catching?" "What are you catching?" Sophie said. "I is catching a frightsome troggle-humper," he said. "This is a bad, bad dream. It is worse than a bad dream. It is a nightmare." "Oh dear," Sophie said. "What will you do with that?" "I is never letting it go," the BFG cried. "If I do, then some poor little toddler will be having the most curb-bloodling dream. This one is a real kick-sleep bob thumper. I is exploding it as soon as I get home." "Nightmares are horrible," Sophie said. "I had one once, and then I woke up sweating all over." "With this one, you would be waking up screaming all over," the BFG said. "This one would make your teeth stand on end. If this one got you, your blood would be freezing to icicles, and your skin would go creeping across the floor." "It's as bad as that?" "It's worse," cried the BFG. "This is a real wopsy gobswitcher." "You said it was a troggle humper," Sophie told him. "It is a troggle humper," cried the exasperated BFG, "but it is also a bog thumper and a gobswitcher. It is all three riddled into one. Oh, I is so glad I is clutching it tight. Ah, you wicked beastie, you," he cried, holding the jar up and staring into it. "Nevermore as you go bunk-doodling the poor human being toddlers." Sophie, who was staring into the glass jar, cried out, "I can see it! There is something in there." "Of course there's something in there," the BFG said. "You was looking at a frightsome troggle-humper." "But you told me dreams were invisible." They is always invisible until they is captured. the BFG told her. After that, they is losing a little of their invisibility. We is seeing this one very clearly. Inside the jar, Sophie could see a faint scarlet outline of something that looked like a mixture between a blob of gas and a bubble of jelly. It was moving violently, thrashing against the sides of the jar and forever changing shape. It's wiggling all over the place, Sophie cried. It's fighting to get out. It'll bash itself to bits. The nastier the dream, the angry it is when it's getting into prison, the BFG said. It is the same as with wild animals. If an animal is very fierce and you be putting it into a cage, it will make a tremendous rumbly dumptious. If it is a nice animal like a cockatoo or a froggle frump, it will be sit quietly. Dreams is exactly the same. There's Sophie looking at the jar. Dreams is exactly the same. This one is a nasty, fierce, bottle-ruggling nightmare. Just look at him splashing himself against the glass. It's quite frightening, Sophie cried. I would be hating this one to get inside me on a darksome night, the BFG said. So would I, Sophie said. The BFG started putting bottles back into the suitcase. Is that all? Sophie said. Are we going? I is so upset by the trog-humpling, bog-thumpling grobscrotter, the BFG said, that I is not wishing to go on. Dream catching is finished for today. Soon Sophie was back in the waistcoat pocket of the BFG and was racing home as fast as he could. When at last they emerged out of the mist and came onto the hot yellow wasteland, all of the other giants were sprawled out on the ground, fast asleep. All right. Until next time, thank you guys so much for reading with me. Have a great week. Hope you all are well. Take care.